So we are back with our Advent podcast devotion, and we're on episode 3, and this episode's called Come Thou Long Expected Jesus. Every episode we have entitled with a Christmas carol hymn, and this one it was written by, do you know who it was written by? Lisa? It's right there on the screen.
Charles Wesley.
There you go. We actually sang this song on Sunday at our church, and why I picked this particular song, and this song is a very old hymn, but we are going to talk about the theme of grace today, which is an important theme when we talk about Christ and Christmas, because Christ came into the world to die for our sins, and it's by grace that we're saved, not by works. But there is a line. This is actually not a very long hymn, by the way. It's only 2 verses. But it starts with, Come thou long expected Jesus, born to set thy people free. From our fears and sins release us. Let us find our rest in thee. And later on in verse 2, it talks about Christ the King, born to reign in us forever. Now thy gracious kingdom bring. And so these topics of God's grace on sinners and that Christ being a king is actually a major thread in talking about the character of Jacob. And Jacob, if you don't know, is a character in the Bible that had to wait a lot, actually, which, again, are major, the idea of the waiting people. God's people are waiting people. And so I want to talk about Jacob. And am I talking too loud? Okay, sorry. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, talking about this song, it's funny, I don't think I've really thought of it as a Christmas song, but in the car today, I was with the little kids and was like, listen to some Christmas music. What do I have on my Christmas playlist? And I was like, oh, that's right. I have this like Christmas kids playlist. And it was really just the Getty Kids Hymnal Family Carol Sing is the album from Keith and Kristen Getty. And it's an album of all Christmas songs, and this one's on there. It was the second song. So yeah, for some reason, I've never thought of it as a Christmas song, but it is a good one.
Yeah, it is. It kind of does. And interesting enough about Christmas hymns or Christmas carols is that a lot of them could be sang throughout the year, and actually, and we will maybe talk about this when we use this song later on. But Joy to the World was not originally a Christmas song. It wasn't used by the church during Christmas. It then later on became a song used primarily on Christmas. But if you read the lyrics, it's a song you could sing all year long. So we're going to talk about Jacob. And so we're going to start off with Jacob's story. And Lisa, I'll let you read this passage. It's if you want to scroll down on the mouse, and it has the same notes. But the first point is Jacob, the mischief son. He is a character of mischief. He is a son who, with his mom's help, takes advantage of his aging blind father. And so, yeah, why don't you read? We're going to kind of introduce him and then talk more about how he fits the Christmas story.
Yeah, it's from Genesis 27, verses 41 through 46. Now Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. But the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah. So she sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, behold, your brother Esau comforts himself about you by planning to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee to Laban, my brother in Haran, and stay with him a while until your brother's fury turns away, until your brother's anger turns away from you and he forgets what you have done to him. Then I will send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereft of you both in one day? Then Rebekah said to Isaac, I loathe my life because of the Hittite women. If Jacob marries one of the Hittite women like these, one of the women of the land, what good will my life be to me?
Very dramatic. I like that.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, tell us where we've how do we get to this point in Jacob's life?
There's not Jacob stole his blessing of Esau.
That's right. And
they just tricked, like you said, they tricked their father. And, Esau went hunting and Jacob's like, Well, his mom, like, here, I'll make this stew and go bring it into him quickly. His dad's like, well, that was kind of quick. But because I guess his senses were so dim, he could not see or...
He was blind.
Yeah. And he thought he was maybe being tricked, but then Jacob was a good trickster, and he like wore his brother's clothes and even put fur on his hands to make him seem hairy like his brother. So he stole his blessing. And also there's a piece where Esau didn't really value his blessing because it goes before that. He was like came in starving after hunting, and he's like he wanted Jacob's food, and he's like, give me your blessing. Or is a blessing that he asked for.
That's right. Yeah.
And he's like what is that to me? I'm going to die if I don't eat. He's like, okay, fine. Yeah, give me the stew for some blessing, or for my blessing as the older brother. And then he like resented him after that. So there is a piece where Esau didn't really value that and let it go for some food.
And, Jacob is, we know in the story, he is the son that the promise is going to go through. Even though he wasn't the firstborn, he was the secondborn by just moments. He grabbed onto his brother's heel. And Jacob with his mother's help, deceives his father to steal something from his brother. And we see, as you read, Esau wants to kill his brother. Kind of going back to the Cain and Abel story, kind of come up again. These two brothers that are feuding with one another. But he has to work for her. And so why don't you read Genesis 29:15-20.
Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than I should give her to any other man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her.
So he waited 7 years to be able to marry Rachel. And so he waits for her, and he works. This is his wage, is being able to marry Laban's daughter. So this is the weirdest story, one of the weirdest stories in the Bible. So, and I don't really know a lot of the historical background, but I guess, on your wedding night, the woman is still in like her veil. Like you don't actually, and probably drank a lot of wine as well.
And there was no electricity for lights.
That's true.
So I'm guessing their tent must have been very dark.
Very dark.
Did not recognize
that
his wife was not the woman he thought.
No. So
she must have been very quiet too. Must have been like, I'm not going to talk.
Yeah, she's not
during the whole ceremony.
She just like, this is her one chance to get married, and so she does. So
did they hide Rachel away somewhere? Because wouldn't she been like, hey, Jacob?
This again, women don't have a lot of choices back then. So so he wakes up in the morning, and Leah's right there. And so Jacob is in the end of Genesis 29. Jacob said to Laban, what is it that you have done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? Laban said, it's not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Complete the work of this one, and we will give you the other. Also in turn for serving me another 7 years. So now Jacob has to work another 7 years to be able to marry the woman he wants to marry, which is Rachel. And Jacob agrees to do so, and he completed... So it says he completed her week, and then Laban gave him his daughter, Rachel, to be his wife. And Laban gave his female servant to his daughter, Rachel, to be her servant. So he ends up waiting 14 years to be ready to marry Rachel. And he actually works another 6 years for Jacob after he's married his 2 daughters. So he's worked for him for 20 years as a part of his kind of working for Laban. But he waits a long time to be able to marry the woman he loves, right? The one he wants to marry, which is Rachel. And then Leah's kind of thrown in there as a part of the deal. So we see Jacob waiting. We still, thinking about Jacob, he's still a character who there's not a lot of like wholesome qualities about him as you read more about his story. He kind of deceives Laban with the sheep to be able to take some of his wealth away. And so he ends up, after all this is done, after 20 years, he's a very wealthy man with a large herd, with two wives, and now 12 sons and other daughters. So he has a large family. But he's still some of this character that doesn't have a lot of wholesome qualities about him. And he's still the one who is hated by his brother. And we're about to get to that part of the story. So do you mind reading Genesis 32, verse 10?
I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with my only staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 camps.
So basically, he is hearing that his brother is looking for him. And so we get to this point where he's afraid of his brother, Esau, and he's afraid his brother's coming to kill him, right? Because that's kind of how the story ended when he left his home. So he really is crying out to the Lord for relief, for refuge, and he's basically saying he is a man who he's not worthy of God's love and faithfulness. And so we get to the next part of the story where he wrestles with the Lord and he asks the Lord for blessing. And really what he's asking for the Lord is for protection, for his security over him, he's afraid of his brothers coming to kill him. And we see later on, that's a pretty prominent part of Jacob's story, that he makes peace with his brother. He is a wealthy man, and this is what God says to him in Genesis 35, 9 through 15. If you want to read that, Lisa.
God appeared to Jacob again when he came from Paddan Aram and blessed him. And God said to him, your name is Jacob. No longer shall your name be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name. So he called his name Israel. And God said to him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall come from your own body. The land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac I will give to you, and I will give the land to your offspring after you. Then God went up from him in the place where he had spoken with him. And Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he had spoken to him, a pillar of stone. He poured out a drink offering on it and poured oil on it. So Jacob called the name of the place where God had spoken with him Bethel.
So God reassures Jacob that the promise that he made to Abraham, that God was still committed to, that God was going to fulfill that promise, even though Jacob, and again, going back to the story with Jacob and his father Isaac and his brother Esau, Jacob took things in his own hands. His mom helped him do this, deceiving his father to get their blessing, to get their inheritance, even though God had already promised that he would give this to him. And we see later on in the story that, with the wrestling with God and how God, damaged his hip, as we see, but also he's promising him that he is going to be faithful to him, even though he doesn't deserve it. God provides him grace, right? And actually, not to focus on this part of the story too much, because I want to get to the end here, but even when his family there's famine going on in the land, his son that he loves the most, Joseph, was, sold into slavery. He thought he was dead, right? Joseph's brothers tried to get him killed and then sold him into slavery. But God actually sent Joseph ahead to be the governor over Egypt so that they could buy grain and be able to feed themselves. So God was still protecting them and watching over Jacob and his family. God was still committed to his promises, and God was providing grace and love to his family, even though, again, his family was messed up. His sons were not the greatest, right? It will lead several different episodes of Jacob's sons' lives where they were not good men, and yet God was still providing grace. So we see at the end of Jacob's story, this is before he dies, he's blessing his sons, and very similar to what Isaac did to him, but he says this about one of his sons, Judah. It's his fourth son by Leah. Could you read that, Lisa? This is 49, 8 through 12.
Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down. He crouched as a lion and as a lioness. Who dares rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Binding his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he has washed his garments in wine and his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine and his teeth whiter than milk.
So this passage is really important when we think about Jesus and his kingship. Jesus comes from the line of Judah. And in this blessing, again, this is a long time before Jesus. This is the time of Jacob. But he says about Judah, the fourth son, that the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. So talking about that through this son, the line of the kings will come from him, even using terms like lion's cub. He crouches as a lion, as a lioness who dares rouse him, which Jesus is mentioned in Revelation as a lion, right? And so this language is to help us understand that even though, again, even Judah in particular, if you go back to his story, he sleeps with his daughter-in-law and has a child with her. And because he thinks she's a prostitute. And this, again, showing that God has grace on sinners. Even in the line of Jesus comes to save sinners. And his genealogy is full of sinners. We know that King David comes from this line. 1 Samuel chapter 17, his father Jesse is from the line of Judah. And then we see in Matthew 1, 2 through 3. Again, the genealogy of Matthew. We talked about the song that Andrew Peterson has, which is a great song. If you want to listen to a kind of unique Christmas song, it's that one on the Blessed.
Called Matthew's Begats.
That's right. The Behold the Lamb album by Andrew Peterson. But Andrew was the father of Isaac. And then we see that Jacob, the father of Judah. And Judah, the father of Perez. So we see again, and then of course in Revelation 5:5, and one of the elders said to me, "Weep no more. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has conquered, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals." And so one of the major themes of the Christmas story is that Jesus didn't just come into the world; he came to save sinners who cannot save themselves. So the baby lying in a manger is a sign of God's grace. And we see throughout Scripture. And Jacob's story, I think, quite well is God's grace on Jacob and God's grace on his family. And I think that's an important theme to look through when we think about Christmas.
And you can pull the whole Bible story together when you see that God, through this, is fulfilling his purpose and plan.
Mm-hmm.
So, he knew from the beginning he'd be sending his son and working through these people, this family, to then bring Jesus into the world. It goes back thousands of years where we see him fulfilling that purpose. And we get to see it on this side of Jesus' birth and death and resurrection. They just knew these promises were being given to them. They didn't know when it would be fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of time that they had to wait.
Mm-hmm. And waiting for a Redeemer who would save them from their sins. And that's what we see about when we come to the Christ, and is that Christ came to save sinners, and by grace we are saved, not by works.